there? Poor little guy. My name is Luna. You have the kindest face I've seen all day.
Really enjoyed the short, which I knew I would because it was you, but I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to make. And now that people are seeing it, I'm like, if this gives people 22 minutes of happiness in the midst of whatever they're going through in their lives, I can't imagine a better responsibility as a filmmaker to make something like that.
Yes. Some of us think we're living in the darkest timeline, so I'll take whatever joy I can get. So, I like throwing some curveballs at the beginning before I get into why I'm talking to you. You've done a lot of stuff. Which shot or sequence in all the things you've worked on ended up being like the toughest to pull off, and why?
That is a great question. The entirety of A Ghost Story, perhaps, just because we were never confident that the sheet would work. That was 19 days of edge of your seat, gut churning dread. But for one sequence, I mean, we should put a pin in this until we talk next year about Mother Mary, because that would be the one. But the movie that I'm making now certainly has that. That was the one where I won't talk about it because no one's seen the movie yet, but has had some of those sequences in them, certainly. Every movie has them, and they always feel like this. Nothing has ever been harder. And then you make the next one. You're like, what was I thinking about? That was a piece of cake. This one's the hardest.
That's because you climbed the hill already on the previous one and solved whatever you had to solve.
Yeah. And often they're the things like the Great Hall sequence in Green Knight. That one is an easy one to talk about being a very challenging sequence, because not only was it at the end of the shoot, we were all exhausted. I was medically incapacitated for most of it in one way or another. And so a lot of medication, not enough time. And also I was realizing that my ambition as a filmmaker had changed over the course of making that movie. And what we had 5 days to shoot really should have had 30. And that was like a sequence where we were just like, do we have the beat that is described in the script on camera? And if the answer was yes, we moved on. And then I had to figure out how to make everything feel intentional in the edit. And that was a sequence that I need to not, I'm glad you asked this question, because I need to not forget about that sequence. That was like a real mountain that I don't know if I ever fully reached the top of, but definitely, eventually got pretty close.
I could drill down on this, but let's jump into why I get to talk to you. So how did this short film happen for you? Was it Alfonso reaching out? Like, had you seen the previous ones and you're like, oh, I want to do this?
I think if my memory is correct, and my memory of the past few years is a little hazy at this point, because there have been all sorts of time warps that have happened, but it was Christmas of 2021. So Les Pupilles had just come out and was probably about to be nominated for an Oscar. And so I saw that one. Also, as a fan of Alicia, she's incredible. So I knew about that. I didn't know that it was part of a series of short films that Alfonso had managed to get Disney to greenlight, which is an incredible feat. And I received an email from him and Gabriela Rodriguez, who's his producer, and he and I got on a Zoom to talk about this. And part of the reason I said yes was like, I just want to go talk about movies with Alfonso. Like I'd never met him before. But the icing on the cake was that they had sent me this script that he and Jack Thorne had written. And it was lovely. Like, just absolutely like a treat to read. It was right as I was getting ready to go do pickups for Peter Pan and Wendy. And that movie was, such a big, huge, gigantic, all-consuming thing that the idea of making something short and sweet felt very appealing. And it also felt far away because it was a Christmas movie. So I thought, we're not going to make this till next Christmas. Like, what a great, I'll get to spend the next year just sort of like building my way towards making this wonderful short film. We'll shoot it in New York. It'll be like, it was live action at that point. And I was like, I'm going to spend 2 months in New York at the holidays, my favorite time of year, favorite time to be in the city. this sounds like just an utter joy. And I get to collaborate with Alfonso. Of course, I'm going to say yes to this. So that's how it came about. And then I spent the next year realizing how hard it was going to be to make this movie in live action in New York City at Christmas time. And it sort of started to change course at that point.
So that leads me to my next question. Things always change in the production process. So I did not realize you originally were thinking about this with live action. With the script, is it the same thing that you guys originally, were going to do, and it's just now in animation?
More or less, because over the course of that, the months leading up to Christmas of 2022, which is when we were thinking of shooting it, I had rewritten the script, or at least begun to rewrite the script. One of the things that Alfonso encouraged me to do was to make it my own. He's like, I wrote this, but make this a David Lowery movie. And so I had a couple of things I wanted to address initially, just like things I was like, this just for my taste, like here I would move A to B and get rid of C and add D. But I really, as you do with any script, you start to like work on it and just it becomes more and more personal. You start to bring more of yourself into it. And so it was different from what he had sent me, and yet still very similar when we decided to start thinking about animation. And one of the things that I had realized in the process of doing that was I have made movies with photoreal talking animals before. And I love our Green Knight Fox. I love Elliot and Pete's Dragon, although he doesn't talk. I didn't feel that was necessary for this one. I wanted to treat the animals differently. And so I proposed that we shoot everything in live action, but do all of the animals with something that may not be stop motion, but that it has a sort of handmade feel to it. I wanted all the animals to feel like they were made, like handmade Christmas decorations or something like that. And I was unknowingly setting out on the path that led us to the eventual aesthetic choices that manifested in the movie that you've seen. But that was the very first inkling of stepping into a different territory with this movie.
So going back to what I said at the beginning, but which shot or sequence in this was the one that ended up being really difficult? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that certain things in animation and certain shots are just more expensive than others. And you need to limit where and when you deploy those resources. In
the screenplay that I read in December of 2021, there was a sequence that says, moon takes off, and thus we begin a chase sequence that will feel like the French Connection with pigeons. And it covered so much ground in New York City. It had, and I was like, I love shooting chase sequences. So I was like, I cannot wait to dig into this. And so we put together this incredibly extensive, spectacular chase sequence. My brother, who does concept work for all of my movies, he did the storyboards. And we were just like coming up with so many gags, so much ground covered. Just like they covered so much of New York City in this chase sequence. And that one was definitely where I realized that every frame has a dollar sign on it when you're making animation. Yep. And that removing some of those frames was necessary, and really kind of finding which ones are the most necessary to the story really that was my big learning curve, was realizing is like every beat of an animated film needs to contribute to the story in a way that every beat in a live action film should do that too. But there you have more room to look for these random grace notes on set. You could be like, oh, look at what the sun's doing through the trees. Let's go shoot that. And maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. With animation, if you're going to make the choice to film sunlight coming through the trees, it better be for a really good reason. So really distilling down those big sequences that cover a lot of ground was the one that I think on a technical level, those were the most challenging. I think, it's still, it was an incredibly difficult sequence. Like even just the one shot where it was something I'd storyboarded where it's like, I wanted to be on 60th Street, leaving Rockefeller Plaza on the top of a taxi cab that turns the corner onto 5th Avenue. And the sun needs to be setting down 60th the way it does at a certain time or in reality, it rises on 60th behind St. Patrick's Cathedral. I was like, all of that needs to be in one shot. And that was like a renderer's nightmare, like to get all of that. And the lighting needed to be a very specific type of lighting. And there weren't cuts in it. One of the things I've learned from Alfonso is how good a really beautiful oneer can be when it succeeds. And I definitely had planned on doing a lot of those in this. And the ones that still exist certainly were not easy to pull off technically.
Yeah, there should be down the road a course just on his oneers in movies. Indeed. And what he's done, because it all goes back for me to Children of Men, but yep. It's just his oneer work is fucking insane.
Especially as it's gotten more invisible, because there are the ones like Children of Men where you're like in the car, you're like, oh my God, this is one take. It's still going on. But now I don't know if you've seen Disclaimer yet, but I just finished it last night.
No, yeah, I haven't started. I swear it's on my list.
It's invisible oneers where you're like, wait, when was the last edit? You don't even think about it. It's a new level of it for him.
I love the scene. I don't know how we can say it, of when Little Moon is talking to the girl and they're each talking but not understanding each other. And then you have the John C. Reilly song underneath it all. Just talk about the construction of that, because I think it just plays so well.
That was something that was in the original script that really appealed to me, with this idea of these two characters who don't, the different species, so they're not going to be able to communicate, and yet they both want the same thing. And it was originally very underlined in the script. We had a lot of business about them not being able to understand one another. And it was one of the beautiful discoveries in the animatic stage where my editor, Mike, who's worked on everything since A Ghost Story, he recorded all the voices himself and laid them in. And we realized, like, maybe we're hitting this nail a little too hard, not because it's unimportant, but because it was something that could emerge much more gracefully and beautifully. And I really wanted there to be a simplicity to this, and for it to not just because of every frame costs a certain amount, because I wanted this to be a very simple and streamlined and elegant film. And so we just started boiling that down, and I realized what I could do is have if they were just talking at the same time, and every it really could kind of come down to a number of syllables. If one character would say a certain number of syllables, then the other character would talk, and you would just have their sentences build on top of one another. You would get the sense of both the misunderstanding and the fact that they can't understand one another, but also their mutual similarities in a really beautiful way. And as a film nerd, I also have to say that one of my favorite scenes in any John McTiernan film is in The 13th Warrior, when they're sitting around the campfire and Antonio Banderas gradually learns the language that the Vikings are speaking. And I always just thought that was such an incredible sequence. And I thought about that a lot while making this film, oddly enough. I was really thinking about Eaters of the Dead a lot. And it's something that you would not expect as a reference point, but it certainly was one.
I swear to you, this might be the headline of our interview, is how John McTiernan influenced a Disney Plus short film. I'm joking, but it could be.
I don't know if you ever listened to Blank Check, but I did an episode with them about The 13th Warrior, and this wasn't done yet, so I couldn't talk about it. But I was like, my whole reason for wanting to talk about that movie was because I love that scene so much.
Yeah, my thing is The Hunt for Red October, when they're zooming in on Sean Connery's mouth, and it goes from Russian to all. And I have always thought that is one of the most brilliant uses of changing language. So you understand they're speaking Russian, but you hear it in English. And I'm like, why don't more movies copy this? Because this is brilliant.
It really is, especially when the movie needs both languages. Like, sure, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, everyone can speak English with an English accent. That's fine, because everyone in that movie is in Scandinavian. But when a plot point pivots on English and Russian, and the fact that they don't speak the same language, but you need the actors to speak in English, it's incredible.
Yeah. So it's rated G. Did you have to battle to get a G rating, or were the MPAA always like, no, this is G?
This one just was an automatic G. I am very proud of this G rating. I really wanted a G rating for Pete's Dragon, but I learned that G is uncool. And for a movie like Pete's Dragon, you need a PG so that kids don't think it's a lame movie. And there's one damn it in Pete's Dragon that was an improv on set that one of the actors did. And they're like, put that in there. That gets us our PG and we're cool. But I really wanted a G. I really love like I don't know, maybe it's just a nostalgic thing, but I love the idea of making a G-rated film. I love that David Lynch has made a G-rated movie. So I want to continue in that tradition.
Yeah, but I understand why they would want PG. But anyway, so one of the things with animation is, and we talked about this, about the cost. So the short is 22 minutes, 24 minutes. I forget what it is. Did you always know going in, we can't go over this amount of time? Like, how did that work in figuring out the runtime?
No, that was a real, I won't say a struggle, but like something I definitely learned. Like as recently as May of this year, the movie was probably 4 minutes longer. And then as we're animating it, we're just like, there's a little bit of horse trading where it's like, okay, we can keep this, but we'd have to lose this. This shot is going to cost this much more to fully animate and render. Even the fact that all of the characters in the movie who aren't our protagonists are just made out of cardboard, which is one of my favorite creative decisions in the movie. That was
by the way, I love the use of cardboard.
I'm a cardboard fan. I love cardboard. This movie fulfills all of my cardboard dreams. But you make these creative choices that are all about finding a way around a limitation. And one of the limitations we certainly had was there were things that I did not want to get rid of that cost more to render. And so to keep those, like the chase sequence, I had to like lose other things. And you really wind up saying like, okay, if I have to lose this sequence that is technically important, can I take the dialogue from it, bring it earlier into the movie, making sure those beats land? Or is it in fact a sequence that's not actually necessary? Again, I focused more on story on this one than I ever have on any movie I've ever made. So many of my movies, I'm really more after a mood or a tone or a vibe. With this one, out of necessity, I really was like, I have to make the story paramount. And you really are, again, looking to make sure every frame is serving that story.
Yeah, I don't think people anyway, I'm really grateful that Disney Plus is making short films like this, because they're just, it's fantastic. Before I run out of time with you, fucking kills me to say this, but they sent me screeners of Skeleton Crew this morning. But I said that right, but I haven't had a chance to watch. But John told me you directed episode 2 and 3.
Yes.
So I definitely have to touch on, what was it like playing in the Star Wars universe and being a part of that series?
As someone who decided to make movies at the age of 7 due to a severe love of Star Wars, this was an incredible full circle moment. And it was, I can say without doubt, the happiest I've ever been on set, simply because I was surrounded by the ephemera of not just my childhood, but the reason I'm where I am now as a human being. To be able to sit in an X-Wing, like, it's dorky to say that, but it's like, it is real. It's profound. Like, it was really special. And to get to make something in that universe, no matter what, people think of the current slate of Star Wars. I know there's a lot of opinions about it, but there's no diminishing the amount that it's mattered to the people it's mattered to. And I'm one of those people. I know you are as well. And so there was it was impossible for it. This could have been a shot for shot remake of the Star Wars Holiday Special, which actually would have been, there actually is a Star Holiday Special reference in the show, but it could have been that. And I would still have been like very moved to have been there and very happy to be there, because I'm participating in something that has been a formative part of my life. The icing on the cake was that it was so much fun to make, and that I think turned out really well. I've honestly, I've seen the first 4 episodes, and I know what happens in the rest of the series, but I'm as a fan, I just was like, I'm not going to watch anything else. I want to sit back over the December and watch this story unfold.
So John told me one of the reasons why I know this show is going to be good is John and John have embraced like matte paintings, stop motion. They went back to like the original Star Wars movies. So did you get to play with any of the matte paintings? Did you get to do anything like vintage Star Wars in your episodes?
I got the Muppet, the Jabba's Palace Muppet experience, where my show, the 2 episodes I did, have so many puppets in them. And I was just in heaven. This is like, as someone who loves puppetry and who loves classic, like, I mean, a big Dark Crystal Labyrinth fan, like loves all of that stuff. I was just like surrounded by puppeteers with their hands in little like creatures, like, and that was just the best. And there was some of these characters, like by now people know that the Teeks from the Ewok films are in this show. And so that's not a spoiler to say that. I was like, are they going to augment these digitally to make them look more real or anything? Or are they just going to go, literally these characters were hand puppets? And that's still what they are. And to be on, we shot, partially on the Volume in Manhattan Beach, and to be on the state-of-the-art soundstage with all these LED screens, putting up this crazy environment, what is technically state-of-the-art technology, but then the camera is focused on a hand puppet. I mean, that is the best. I also just love that Star Wars can include that. Like, I love Andor, where probably you don't want hand puppets popping up every 5 seconds, but that Star Wars can also be inclusive of something like Skeleton Crew, and they both exist in the same universe. That it just reminds me of why I love that series and why I love those movies originally.
Yeah, I got to stop. I have not seen the show yet, but I do think that Andor is the best Star Wars since 1980. I
agree
just,
with that. Yeah.
I can't say it's a fucking masterpiece. It's just it doesn't make sense how good it is.
It not only it doesn't make sense how good it is, but like, I am someone, it is hard to get me to watch a series. One way to get me to watch it is to put Star Wars on it. But like, I really am someone who, like, as much as I love, the form, I just am a movie person. And every now and then I'll see a series, I'm like, that is something that is better than a movie. And Andor was better than a movie. Like, that's something where I'm like, I would rather watch 10 episodes of that than have it condensed into a great film.
Yeah, I got to go. But in this, hopefully for season 2, I'm going to do a Collider event for Andor season 2. But for season 1, we did the first 3 episodes as an event on the Disney lot. And I had, Tony and everybody. And then we did episodes 7, 8, and 9 with Andy Serkis, his
Amazing.
3-episode arc. And seeing those episodes on a movie screen was like, it was amazing.
I mean, we could, when we were doing the grade for Peter Pan and Wendy and trying to look at the amount of film grain to add to it, I was like, hey guys, look at Andor. It's streaming on Disney Plus right now, and it looks like it was shot on 35 millimeter in 1977. Streaming can hold up with some film grain on it.
Yep. Also, they're going to kill me, but like, I personally think that when I'm watching things on streaming that look like they're just shot, like adding what makes film, adding that sort of stuff, like makes it so I don't feel like I'm watching a TV show, like I want to see grain. I want to see that kind of stuff. I want to see grading. I needed to get to the word grading, otherwise it's like, I just watched something the other day. I'm like, you're on location and it just looks still like a TV show. Like, you got to do better.
I wish I could show you the 16 millimeter grade for Peter Pan and Wendy, because it looked freaking great. It was not really, but it looked like it was shot on 16 and it was beautiful.
Yes, you should show me. And I got to stop. But needless to say, man, congrats on the short.